Welcome to Norfolk, and a little bit of history. 100 years ago, windmills working alongside our rivers to drain the adjoining marshes were a common sight. Hardley Mill was one such drainage pump, operating beside the River Yare, the only mill on the south side of the river. This wind pump, powered an Appold turbine, was capable of raising 12 tonnes of water per minute via a 12-foot-high vertical shaft 5 feet in diameter. The mill was built in 1874 for Sir Thomas William Brograve Proctor Beecham of Langley Hall, now Langley School, by Ludham millwright Dan England. It operated until around 1949, when it was tailwinded and badly damaged. It was abandoned by the Internal Drainage Board and, like most other drainage mills, replaced by an electric drainage pump that can be seen further along the river. However, the mill was used during the 1953 floods, powered by 2 tractors, their belts around the mill shaft. The mill is tilted around 6 degrees away from the river. We think it tilted as it was built, as the main floor beams are in their place and the floors are very nearly level but don't fit the brickwork. 3.5 layers of brick were inserted to the top of the mill before the new track was installed. In 1991, with the mill derelict, volunteers under the inspirational leadership of architect and mill enthusiast Peter Grix started work on restoration. By 2005, structural work on the tower was complete. With the award of funding from the Waste Recycling Environment, Norfolk Wren, South Norfolk Council and Leader Plus in 2007 and 8, work on the cap and sails moved on apace. The cap was lifted onto the top of the tower in April 2009, and the sails finally turned on the 9th of October 2009. The Leader Plus grant also allowed for the construction of a visitor centre and moorings. These were both completed in 2009. The internal workings were completed in 2013, with the mill pumping water again under sail power for the first time in over 70 years. The electric pump house is built on the foundation of a previous, much smaller wind pump. A second pump was situated further down towards Hardley Staithe, although the foundations have not been found. At the moment, the sails are fitted with a half set of shutters, which means that they will only generate enough power to drive the pump at the required speed on very windy days. A minimum water level is also needed to work the pump without overheating the bearings. Unfortunately, this means that the pump will only be operated infrequently, when conditions allow. Ground floor of the mill. The first thing to notice is the well to the left of the door. This contains the turbine that, when in action, raises the water from the dike upwards and out of the sluice gates, where it used to go back into the river. This currently flows out into the sluice, and as it fills is channelled through a culvert back into the dike. The original turbine, heavily corroded, is just to the right of the entrance, serving the mill from 1874 until 2011, when it was replaced. Above it is the wooden pattern, which may be loaned to other mills to enable further turbine casts to be made. This is done using wet sand, into which the pattern is forced, leaving an imprint, then removed before hot metal is poured into the cast. Other patterns for the casting brake, pit and crown wheels are also in this area, situated to the right of the well. The main shaft which turns the crown wheel is original, as are the wooden support chocks. and this would normally be connected to the counter wheel running at 90 degrees from it. At the moment, it's disconnected. This would then link to the turbine shaft via the pit wheel and enable the turbine to turn, forcing water upwards. You will notice that throughout the mill, any gear interchange is made by wooden cogs against metal. Although this mill pumps water, any friction between two metal gears may produce a spark, and worse. The other great advantage of this operation is that if anything breaks, it will be the wooden cogs which can be replaced in situ. Taking out a shaft to extract a wheel would be a major task. Operation in this way also helps the gear to run quieter. To the right of the patterns, you will notice a display which contains several of the stages in making the cogs alongside a couple of the shutters, metal frames with canvas covering, which are also displayed here. Just behind the main shaft is a plumb bob that was installed in December 2009 and means that we are able to monitor any movement of the tower. As we progress up the mill, please be aware of the restricted headroom as the stairs pass under the floor above. First floor of the mill. This is the area where the engineer's work may be carried out, if it can be moved from its original position. Their tools are stored in this area, and they also make the various blocks for the cogwheels. The most obvious part in this area is the near 150-year-old oak shaft that connects the crown wheel below with the wallower wheel above. This piece of timber is approximately 29 feet long and is the mainstay of delivering the power between the sails and the turbine. The two oak beams that support the second floor were probably inserted in the 1925 restoration, although some damage to one of them is now supported by a metal channel. We're very lucky to have 4 engineers who give their time voluntarily and are usually around on Tuesdays and Thursdays in season, and when the weather permits outside those times as well. They will also show the public around the mill whenever work allows. Second floor of the mill. As you step out from the stairs, there is a window that gives a preliminary view of the River Yare and the dykes that crisscross the fields behind the mill. On the opposite wall are some photographs of the mill back in the 1930s and some aerial shots of the renovation work carried out. There are some patterns in this area of the countershaft wheels, track segment, rollers, bearing and worm gear. You will also see above your head, just below the next floor, 6 bearing plates, taking the end of rods holding track on the top of the walls, thus compressing and stabilising the top of the tower. Third floor of the mill. The original ironwork, the wallower shaft and wheel, is best seen from this position. Around the castings holding the bearing, you can also see the names of those individuals and families who contributed to the renovation of the mill, be it financially or by physical presence. The castings are stabilised on top of oak, which must be level for the cap to turn into the wind. The brake is applied by releasing the brake lever and allowing the beam to drop, thus causing the outer ring of wooden chocks, made from poplar wood, to make contact with the brake wheel, which is original. When temporarily stopping the mill, it may be easier to sit on the beam to ensure good contact. When closing for the night, we always apply the brake strop to the brake wheel and secure with the shackle to the main frame of the mill. The lubrication system is new and not only oils the rollers, but the tail bearing of the windshaft as well as the Y wheel bearings and the fantail bearings. The front bearing of the windshaft is greased traditionally when it is turning. The worm gear, shaft and pinion can be seen by looking under the tail beam. The roof of the cap is made of red cedar over an oak frame. This was made by the millwright apprentices and lifted by crane to the top of the mill in 2009. Heading outside on the balcony. The fantail wheel and structures were also built by the apprentices. The supports are recycled pitch pine. If there's a steady wind, it may be possible to demonstrate the self-winding mechanism by spinning the fantail by hand. With any luck, this will provoke the fantail to correct bringing the sails back to face into the wind and turning the downshaft. But people who have difficulty with heights may not like looking through the gaps in the platform. The handles on the downshaft are for cranking the cap around by hand. This is hard work. Pulling the chain on the Y-wheel allows the pinion to move the striker rod, and ultimately the spider, which moves the shutter control bars to open and close the shutters on the sail. To the northeast is an abandoned scoop mill on Limpenhoe Marshes. Slightly towards the north is Reedham Boatyard. You might see the crane. To the northwest is Cantley Sugar Beet Factory. In the southwest you can see the radio and radar masts at Stoke Holy Cross, along with Langley School, which is in the same direction. Back to the southeast is Hardley Staithe, and you may see Hardley Church amongst the trees. The weight of the cap and sails is 14.2 tonnes. The brake wheel has 72 cogs, the wallower 34, so that's a ratio of 2.06. The crown wheel has 96 cogs, the counter wheel 37, so the ratio is 2.6. The pit wheel has 84 cogs, the pump shaft has 42, so the turbine shaft turns twice as fast as the cross shaft. One turn of the sails gives almost 11 turns at the turbine. This was all conceived with a piece of paper and pencil. There were no computers to rely on back then. It has been suggested that once contraband has been landed on the Norfolk shore, the Broads provided an elaborate and intricate system of distribution. Barges plying a perfectly legitimate trade were happy to take on board a little extra cargo that provided a higher return than a hold full of coals. The wherrymen who plied the Broads evolved an ingenious semaphore system to warn of the approach of the customs authorities. If a search was suspected by those on the watch, warning was sent by a runner to the nearest marshman. If his mill was turning, he would stop it at the St Andrew's diagonal cross. Then wait until those at the next mill had seen him and done the same. Then he would let the mill turn again. If there was no wind, the boy would be sent up to climb on the sail, and his weight used to turn the mill to the required position. The clear signal would be telegraphed using the St George or square cross on the mill sail. Mills were reputedly used in this way. A message could travel from Yarmouth to Norwich in a quarter of an hour, much faster than a customs man could ride. When a wherryman saw the sails stop turning, he would sink his tubs in the Broad, marking the spot with a float made of reeds. The marshmen at the mill would pick up the contraband later and share in the proceeds. There was a risk attached to this procedure. Sometimes the kegs would drift free and be lost. This possibility was avoided by lobbing the tubs into a drainage ditch. The mill gradually pumped the water along the ditch so that the tubs were delivered directly to the marshmen. Mills were useful for other purposes besides signalling. In communities where no one ever locked their doors, if the doors had locks at all, mills were among the few places that could be secured without arising suspicion. We really hope you've enjoyed the tour of the mill. Hardley Mill is proud to be a restored active mill on the Norfolk Broads. To help continue the maintenance of the mill, please visit hardleywindmilluk.org and become a friend of Hardley Mill.